Hello, my name is Hannah Whitty, and we will be talking about steampunk as a subculture today. We are going to start by looking at the history and origins of steampunk, what it really is. Then we'll take a look at the characteristics of a subculture and how steampunk fits those characteristics. The third thing we will look at is how steampunk members communicate, and then finally, what, if anything, that makes steampunk unique. First, let's look at the history and definition of steampunk. Truly, what is steampunk and when did it start? The term steampunk was originally coined in 1987 by the author J.W. Jeter. The original definition was related to a speculative fiction about what would have happened if technological advances were driven by steam and not by electricity. This era would be considered the first wave of steampunk, but during the 1990s, it remained rather small culture, mainly in the science fiction and graphic novels communities, and not as much as the technology and building and dressing up as we see today. There were many literary inspirations, and there still are, to the steampunk subculture, even before coining of the term. Here you can see three big literary inspirations. H.G. Wells and Jules Verne both were authors before the beginning of the steampunk, but many of their writings are now referenced as influences for what steampunk has become. And then James Blaylock is a more current author who writes in the steampunk style and is considered a steampunk author. He is most known for Homunculus and Lord Kelvin's Machine. Here are just a few pictures of steampunk members in typical outfits that combine the Victorian-era clothing with mechanical and technological elements. Costumes like this and technological builds are very common in this second wave of steampunk that we see today. So what makes steampunk a subculture? There are 5 main characteristics to a subculture that I want to focus on. The first of which is diffusion of networks. There is no hierarchy or formal leadership in steampunk. Everyone is free to join the community and participate to whatever degree you would like. Next, they all find shared meaning in values, practices, and objects related to steampunk. Along with shared meaning is a shared identity or involvement in the subculture. There is a certain level of engagement in order to be considered part of the subculture or to be considered a subculture at all. The fourth characteristic is marginalization. This is the feeling from those in the subculture that there is an in-group and an out-group. Subculture participants often consist of marginalized individuals who do not fit well within the dominant culture. And then shared marginalization is the idea that many subculturists can share the same outsider status despite having different backgrounds in mainstream society. So these group of so-called outsiders come together to create their own society subculture. And then finally, stratification is the collection of values and specialized vocabulary developed by the subculture. Steampunk is going to have values and vocabulary that they understand, and then these values and vocabulary can change and develop within the subculture. So how do steampunk members communicate? There are 3 main things that I found that steampunk members are going to use to communicate. The first of which is Reddit. Reddit is a community-based posting site. The first r/steampunk that I found on subreddit had over 80,000 members, and they said that it is a place to share and discuss all things steampunk. So obviously they're going to communicate on there, posting and reading about other people's builds and all their things that they are doing. The next would be Facebook groups. There are hundreds and hundreds of different groups based on if it's related to art, if they want to swap materials, if you're looking at how to do steampunk on a budget, and then hundreds of different ones for individual cities so that you can get together with those in your city and really have a discussion specific to where you are at location-wise. And then the third thing that I found that steampunk used to communicate would be conventions. There are lots of these for lots of different subcultures. However, steampunk would have opportunities to meet and participate in subculture activities, whether that is buying materials, showing off cosplay type outfits, or really showcasing the things that they have done. So is steampunk as a subculture unique? It's hard to say. Obviously, the content of their subculture is different than any other subculture. However, when you look at the characteristics of a subculture, they fit into those just as many other subcultures do. So they're not unique in what makes them a subculture, however, their content would be unique to them, yes. So today we have looked at the history, origin, and literary inspirations behind steampunk, the characteristics of a subculture and how steampunk fits those characteristics, their communication techniques, whether those be online or in person, and then finally, is it unique to them? The content, yes, however, the idea of a subculture is not. Thank you very much.